Welcome to Coffee and Contracts. My name is Rachel Branke. I am the head attorney and photographer of TheLawTog, the go-to legal resource for photographers. And today's topic, just a little warning if you have any little kids in the room, the title does have a bad word, but is Help, I Want My Clients to Quit Treating Me Like Shit. However, the subtitle of that would not fit into the caption also is what am I doing that's allowing my clients or training my clients or opening the door for my clients to treat me in such a way. Before we get into this, understand I'm not saying that clients are always the bad guys. You're going to see how I'm very client focused, even though we talk legal and legal protection and protecting ourselves. We walk through the process like we've talked on other Coffee and Contracts episodes, how we always set ourselves up for legal protection and success. And when we have an issue, we kind of look and see like what is our legal obligation or rights or requirements here. And then we also want to look to how to see that we can be client focused. If you don't know my background, if you're new to me, I am an intellectual property attorney and I also do contracts for photographers like we have at TheLawTog. But before that, I actually have been in other businesses and I am a business consultant, strategist as well. So I work one-to-one with photographers, not just on legal stuff, but also with trying to make it so that we can get the best bang for our buck in all the actions that we do in our business. And one of those is preventing issues. I know often you guys will hear me say you never have an issue until you have an issue. And that's true, right? That's the mindset that we go into things of, well, I don't have a lot of issues, so I don't need to watch Coffee and Contracts. Well, the goal really is trying to consume and learn and implement things that are going to prevent problems. Like on the legal side, I've said it many times before, is that you're going to spend more time, money, and energy cleaning up a legal issue. But it doesn't start with just your contract. It doesn't start with just the legal stuff. It really starts with how you can implement and act in your business. And really, at the end of the day, we are a service-based business. Even though we do have an end product that is intellectual property, it is photographs, whether you're doing printed, mounted albums, or digital files, we are still in services based. We are capturing moments, at the risk of sounding cliche. But think about it, especially during pandemic. How did businesses and families thrive, or at least survive and stay connected? Visual assets, right? And that is what our output is. So we're not just this product based, we're not just an end result of a product, but we're also services. And I think that's where we need to take the white glove approach of really walking our clients through the process and at the same time preventing issues and demonstrating value. I've talked before, I put it on my social, I really get hot about the topic when photographers say, oh no, pricing's the bad guy, pricing's the problem. Oftentimes pricing's not the issue. Pricing is not necessarily why someone's coming to you. There might be an issue in marketing. We're gonna walk through some of this here in a second, but oftentimes it's the lack of presentation of value that's connected to that pricing, right? So there's just something to think about, that we're also not just looking at preventing issues here. We're also not going to look at just how to clean up issues with our clients, but it's going to give us the added benefit of increasing the value of what we do for our clients to make it easier for them to book us. Pretty sure you probably never heard another lawyer talk about value and marketing and messaging and all that connected around legal stuff. But this is why I love the legal side of things, because at the end of the day, that is what we really need to be mindful of when it comes to liability, but it has so many other great benefits for us. Before we dig in, I do want to invite you to jot down after this for you to come and RSVP for future episodes, and also reach out if there's a specific topic that you want us to talk about. The reason I ended up with this client issue, or how do I get my clients to stop treating me badly, which we're going to define here in a second, is from a lot of things that we see in the Facebook group, you know, and keeping in mind, if you're a newer photographer and you get into our Facebook group and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this, these are so many issues. Well, the reality is you're only seeing the issues because we are an issue or problem solving resource. So just keep that in mind when you're getting in there. You're only seeing a glimmer of it, right? But our goal is to be there to help you clean up those issues, but also prevent them as well. All right, so let's dig in. Oh yes, so first thing what we want to do, sounds common sense, but I'm going to give you a little checklist with this, is we want to educate our clients on the process of what we're doing. And you know what? This is something that I have a tendency to do as well, and this is an issue I'm seeing with a lot of photographers, especially recently when I've been inquiring for my own photography services, for to get photographs taken of me, is all of us run our businesses differently. there's a bell curve. There's a lot of like kind of same business processes and offerings that are out there, but we need to approach and educate our potential clients and clients. Okay, we're gonna educate in two different ways, but educate our potential clients and our clients specifically about our business. Now, of course, the most common tool with that is going to be like with contracts. Always recommend, it doesn't mean this is wrong, but this is the way that we drafted TheLawTog and I drafted at my law firm, is for contracts, we don't want it to be this foreign, crazy legal tool that we're going to scare our clients with. We want to use it for confidence building and also education and expectation, delivery and setting. So the way that I like to draft them is to put it in chronological order. It really is going to almost mirror your workflow, right? So how does the client get booked? What happens after they get booked? What happens with the session? What happens after the session? I mean, just sitting down and sketching out from beginning to end what your workflow looks like, every step. So I'm not just talking about when you load your card in the computer and you pull it into Photoshop or Lightroom and you're running presets. I'm talking about from the very beginning when a potential client comes in the door. Contract is one of the tools that we want to mirror that. But we're also going to take that exact same structure of how that's outlined in our contract, not the exact language, right? We're not necessarily going to take our contractual language, but we're going to take this chronological structure that we see in our contract, but we also want to utilize it in our process that can mirror it just a little bit with our clients, all right? One of the biggest problems. So let's talk on the potential client side here, right? Issues of getting clients booked. It's often there's not enough information being given to a potential client for them to make the decision to book you. Again, it's not always pricing. Pricing is always the bad guy. Pricing gets a bad rap. Poor pricing, man. Pricing is what helps sustain us and gives us money, but that poor thing gets so much of a bad rap. When the reality is the majority of time, and all the times that I'm working with photographers, and I've seen it over in other groups like Ben Hartley's group, Megan DiPiero, and all those, it's not necessarily about the numbers. It's all the supporting or lack of supporting information surrounding it. And this also includes like talking about next steps of the process, right? So we're looking at our contract. We talked about chronological workflow. We talked about communications with the clients. Most often they're going to be through email. Hopefully, even if you're getting them coming through text or some other way, let's try to condense them into one communication method as much as possible. And also your website and your messaging. You might have blogs out there talking about how to get booked, or frequently asked questions page, or even just your main part of your page that says, all right, you ready to get started? Walk them through. Incredibly important. But what you notice is I've been sitting here with 3 fingers up. There's a reason for that, not just for you guys to write down the checklist, but my big recommendation in business, and you're gonna see this 3 rule here as we go through this, is very important information, something that we want a very specific result out of, we want clients to hear or be educated on at least 3 times. Okay, so one of the key things that we want to talk about is like our offerings. What are our offerings? Website, communications with client, and contract. Okay, so those are 3 different times. Or how to get booked, those 3 different ways. Take it another step. Let's go to the side of our client is already booked, right? Considering, remember, they're not a client. They don't shift from potential client to client until they have paid that initial non-refundable payment plus executed our contract. But with client, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're still going to target in. We're going to use our contract to walk them through the process, and we're going to have communications with the clients that's going to handhold them through the process. So far, I've talked about let's use the information to get our clients booked or potential clients booked and in the door. But once they're a client, we're still going to utilize the exact same tools to walk them through the process. What I mean is this. Let's say you have your session. All right. And what is the most logical question that comes next from a client? When are our photos going to be ready? And as a side note here, something I should have said earlier, the more often that clients have to ask questions about your process, or the more difficult it is to get a hold of you or pay you to give you the money, the quicker their buyer's confidence in you is going to erode. I keep saying, pricing's not the bad guy, pricing's not the bad guy. We talked about value perception and building up the value. But the other side of that is we need to look and see where we are tearing down the value or just simply not giving it. And the more that a client has to chase you to give you money, to ask you a question, stuff that we could preempt, not just legal side, but letting them know the information, like in this example of when are my photographs going to be ready? What are our communication tools here. We're going to have three main ones. Our contract is already going to talk about when the gallery is going to be ready. Whether you're a person that does online in-person sales, online send the gallery, or you do in-person sales, or whatever your structure looks like, we want to have some sort of expectation in the contract and said to the client of when they can expect that their photographs are going to be processed and ready, whether it is for them to download, order products, or whatever the next phase of your process is, right? So the first one is that we'll have addressed this in the contract. Another one, yeah, actually two more. One's going to be verbal. It's at the end of the session. It's one of the things that I love to do because let's be real, I'm a little awkward when I cannot get off the phone. If any of my clients on here, and this is probably good why I don't bill by the hour, because I have a tendency to just talk. I love to talk, and I am the worst of getting off the phone, right? And so I'm like the same at the end of the session. I just feel like it's so awkward when you're like, your hour's up, let's go. So a nice little segue that also achieves what we're talking about here is, oh, hey, this is great. I think we got everything we need. Just to let you know, your photographs will be ready for viewing, proofing, download, whatever, in X amount of weeks. Okay, so that's twice that we have informed them of this really important information. And I'm not saying you have to do it just on this. I'm using this as an example. I do this in my workflow, and I've seen that it helps to build buyers' confidence because we want our clients to stay excited, right? In the contract's the contract, gives the information. But at the end of the session, it gives you a way to wrap it up. Let them know you're hand holding them through the whole process, mirroring your contract, but it's mirroring your workflow. You're hand holding and verbally telling your client through the entire process what to expect next. It helps to build that buyer's confidence, and it reduces potential issues. And third, it is after the session, I also recommend having like an automated email that just blasts out to them, reiterating what we just said. Sounds stupid, but it's also good to have that written follow-up communication just in case, because I know for me, I've got 5 kids. At the end of the session, you may be talking to me, but my kids are done. My 7-year-old, the baby, she's the princess, she thinks she's everything. She's probably a mess and crying, and I'm dealing with her, and I'm probably not adequately hearing it from you. So this is why it is important that we don't just expect clients to just read the contract, although they should, or just tell our clients important things one time and expect them to hear it. So go through, and I want you guys to take a little time, and whether it's now or later on, and kind of think about what are the key things that I can help to do to build buyers' confidence in my client. What are the top questions that they're asking? We talk about in the booking process, website, email, and contract. Where can I beef that up? Because it also saves you time of having to answer them. On the client side of things, what are the top questions that I'm getting? Because every time you're having to answer an email or a text or a social media message, you're losing money. The phrase time and money is so incredibly important because we do our cost of doing business. We do our cost of goods. We do all of that. We say how much we want to make, but you're actually making less per hour the more you're having to respond to clients. So not only are you opening the door for potential legal issues, you're eroding the client confidence every time they have to ask questions of what the next steps are, what they need to do, and they're just in this air of mystery. And you are wasting your time. You're making less money, okay? So we've got these different tools that we can use that are going to help to prevent the issues with our clients. And these are just some little examples. Other examples could be talking about, the type of license that the client is purchasing, or maybe even you're in a situation where you do weddings and your bride mentions, oh, I want to share it with the venue, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. You can do an education like verbally or in the moment, but we want to try to the most important things that we really try to have as many touch points. And I think 3 is a really good number when you're looking at really important things for your clients, because it really sinks in, but it also CYAs for you as well. All right, so website messaging, contracts, and emails, all of that. Now here's another thing, and this is an area that a lot of times we don't really talk about. It's boundaries, all right? So I'm saying be accessible to clients, provide them this information, but there is an element that clients or customers or anything, they're almost trained, we almost train them to treat us a certain way. Let me give a really big example. We had a holiday weekend here in the US a couple weeks ago, Easter. And I remember seeing on a couple of threads in the TheLawTog and other groups, people aghast. And it doesn't just happen at holidays, but photographers aghast at how dare this client email me on Easter? Or, oh my gosh, this client is sending me a Facebook message on Saturday night. Okay. Let's just assume in these situations, the client's just simply inquiring, right? Maybe inquiring to book or where their photographs are, or just saying, hey, I want to buy an extra print for grandma, right? It's not any sort of client entitlement of, you must answer to me now, but even if it is, right? It's on us as the business owners to set the boundaries, but also not automatically believe that it's in the negative. I just mentioned a little bit ago that we want to try to educate and inform clients as though they've never gone into personal portraiture before. Even if they're an existing client of yours, if your processes have deviated at all, it's on you to re-educate the clients with the tools that we just talked about. Building that buyer's confidence, legal protection, and all this sort of thing, right? But I think what's important in this is that we need to look at it and first start with how can we set the boundaries and not automatically assume that necessarily that the clients are doing like inquiring in a nefarious way. They're not sending you a message on Easter because they want to ruin your Easter. Take, for example, not everyone celebrates Easter. Or like for me, I'm busy doing this stuff during the week. So when it's time for me to actually sit down and look for family photographer for our beach vacation, it might actually be on a Saturday night when I've been scrolling through Pinterest in my bed and I go, oh yeah, I need to reach out. I'm not actually expecting a response. But my point with this is it's on us as the photographer, as the business owner, to set the boundaries, right? You can say, well, I put it in my signature. I don't know why I just got that tone, but that's the way I read it sometimes when I see it in groups when people are like, how dare they email me on a Saturday night? I put it in my signature that my office hours are only between 9 to 5. Well, guess what? I don't have during the 9 to 5 necessarily to email you, and I'm not demanding a response. So guess what? Simply don't respond, right? And to my point, what I was saying a little bit ago about training of our clients, I don't mean that like in a negative way, but if we don't let our clients know that we have a preferred method of communication, or we act on responding on a Saturday night, or even though we don't want to, or we just don't simply communicate and say, hey, out of office at weddings for the weekend, or if that out of office message, I'll get back to you on Monday. Like there are tools and things that you can do that doesn't necessarily open the door. And I think what's incredibly important is that it is on us to figure out what our boundaries are and to set them. Yes, there's going to be clients who act entitled. Yes, there's going to be clients that have an issue with that. But I know like for me, when I've inquired to photographers and I haven't heard from them, if I have no information back from them of they're out of office having a baby, I don't know, or if they're on vacation or they only work certain days, in like a week I might go, guess they're not interested. And that's what the normal buyer psychology goes to. Oh, well, I guess not, let me move on. Right? So I'm saying this as an encouragement. I'm not saying to sit here and bend to what your clients want. I'm actually saying let us set our boundaries. Let's educate our clients what our boundaries are, not assume the worst in them, and then stick to it, because you really do condition people. I was going to say train, but that sounds so negative. But you do condition people to do certain acts, right? If you are always communicating with them by text, you're conditioning them to communicate with you by text. If you don't say to them, hey, what's your email? Let me move this over to email. That's on you as the business owner. All right. And so we can't get upset about that if we're not taking the lead, because as business owners, we have to take up this whole idea that we are here to lead that. Just like we talked about with the education a little bit ago, we're leading them, we're hand-holding them through the process. When it comes to things that are boundaries are important, we also need to make sure that we're taking the lead on that as well. Is this going to resolve and prevent all issues? No, it's not. You're going to have clients out there that are entitled, that expect X, Y, and Z. But I think you'll find that the majority of people that you work with, if you just educate them and let them know, here's what's up, that is what's so incredibly important. I also see this even being as an employer, right? I have a lot of people, many of you that are photographers as well, that may do side work for me because you know the industry and I love it. I can get into your brains and it's so great because we can mastermind. But if I say, hey, I have this job for you, and you say, okay, I'll do it, and then 3 or 4 weeks pass and I don't hear from you, what do I start assuming? Well, you just flaked, right? And it's the same thing with our clients. Whereas if you just say, hey, no, it's tax season, I'm really busy, or it's wedding season, I got to do this, then I'm like, okay, cool. Like if you're upfront and honest, that's going to go a lot further. So I would actually, in a situation, if you're afraid maybe of not, you know, oftentimes we don't set boundaries because of fear. We're afraid a client's going to go to the next photographer, or the client's going to reject us, or that it's going to cause issues. I think you'll find that boundaries are actually going to guide the process with the clients, and they're going to help reduce issues as opposed to causing them. And just, it's all about communication. I think that's so incredibly important. And as a side note on this, and I've talked about these books before on Coffee and Contracts and in the group, is I love books. Is it Dr. Robert Cialdini? It's Persuasion. Oh my goodness, I'm going to butcher it. Influence, Power of Persuasion. Then he has a Persuasion book, and it talks about a lot about consumer psychology, but I love the fact that it's got tidbits about communication in there. And I'll tell you what, I'm almost 40 and I'm still learning how to communicate, and I'm always fine-tuning it, which is what I'm going to walk into the process here of how we want to evaluate how things are going. So we can do this prevention, but we also want to look at how we can reevaluate that. But those are great books. In fact, Influence is one of the books that I have read. My copy is in my office. I have read probably, oh man, I don't know, 15, 20 times. I've got notes. It's almost like a business Bible in a way, because if you learn on this communication, the setting of boundaries, you can prevent these issues. It's going to help you legally, right? It's going to help prevent issues. It's going to help if you have legal issues. Because actually, if you have really good communication with your clients, it makes it really easy for me to resolve an issue before you get into court. If you do end up in front of a judge, it makes it really easy for me as a lawyer to explain what the intentions were, etc. So none of this shorthand, TBH, to be honest, that kind of stuff. Like real effective professional communication. I'm not saying you have to use like wherefore or thou and shall and all that kind of crap, but just really clear, effective communication. But yeah, so Dr. Robert Cialdini is a really good book that you guys can add on to this. Oh, my point with that is it also talks about anchoring when it comes to pricing and sales and all of that. So client psychology and buyer psychology permeates all areas of business that we need to be mindful of. Okay. So, issue resolution. So far we talked about education. We talked about the different tools based on the phase of the process that they're in. Boundaries, having contracts. I'm not sure if I mentioned contracts. Contracts also help to set the boundaries as well. Like for example, how many photographs are you going to deliver in gallery or are you not? What's the timeline process going to be when you're going to deliver? If there is going to be an archival fee or not. These are all boundaries. And I almost like to picture it like a maze or like a pinball machine. It's guiding, or bumpers for bowling. It's like guiding through your client through the process. And if we start looking at it from that way, and with our contracts and having a more client-focused type of approach, it's going to come across more client-focused but still provide you legal protection. Okay, so last little bit here is we can't prevent all these issues, so how can we resolve them? And this is the process that I walk through, whether you're one of my business strategy clients or you come to me at the law firm and we need to resolve a legal issue, maybe to prevent getting into court, or you already have gotten slapped with a lawsuit, because it happens a lot. We want to first start with, what is the client actually asking for? And the most common example I can think of this is, I want all the raws. Or no, is that the example I want to give? We could do raws. Or we could say, no, I want all the rights. I want all the rights. Okay, Sally, what do you mean by all the rights, right? So what I see this so much in the TheLawTog is, and I love that you guys come to us, right? So I'm not sitting here going, oh, you come and post this. I love that you do it, but I want to try to give you a little bit of help here in the off chance that you're not getting responses right away, that you need this to kind of help bridge the gap for you, right? Is if a client comes to you and asks the question, and we've seen it like with commercial licensing, my response always back is, well, what is the usage? Or if the client says, I want all the rights, well, ask the client, what does that mean to you, right? Communication, what does that mean to you? Because oftentimes you jump in the group and go, oh my God, my client wants all the copyrights, what do I do? And friends, it is almost always the client just wants to say, hey, I want to be able to print it to put on postcards for family Christmas cards. I don't know. It's typically going to be personal use, but even if it's not, what did it just do? It opened the door for you to set boundaries, to point to contract. It opened the door also to allow you to do maybe a cross-sell or upsell. We talked about this a couple episodes of Coffee and Contracts. If it's a personal portrait client and they are, you can maybe cross-sell them or upsell them into a commercial license out of those photographs. And so don't be afraid to simply ask your clients, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by it? I think sometimes we're scared to ask this question because it makes it look like we don't understand, which could then lead to a potential client losing faith or confidence in us. But actually, stats show, and I actually think it's in Dr. Cialdini's book, that when you ask questions, you're getting clarity on what they're asking for. You're going to better be able to resolve the solution. But, and this is the part that I think Dr. Cialdini talks about, is when someone is able to talk more about themselves or more of what they want, and it's something that is self-interested, they actually walk away from a conversation with a higher sense of positivity or a higher sense of investment than if you completely do all the talking. So like, for example, this, right? If we were in like a group coaching situation, which I do, and you were asking questions, you're probably gonna walk away with a more positive feeling experience rather than me being the talking head and the professor speaking to you guys right now. And so think of that approach too. When your clients ask you a question, what is it that they really want? Well, what are you wanting to do with the photographs? You don't have to say, okay, dummy, what kind of rights do you want? Like, I think sometimes we're afraid that that's the way it's going to come across. So it's just, well, explain to me rights. What do you want to do with these photographs? And actually, these are questions that we should have asked in the very beginning so we could be teasing, marketing during session and all this sort of stuff. But what exactly do you want to do with the photographs? What is your end goal? What do you envision? And just shut up and listen. Literally shut up and listen. I know that sounds like such a basic thing, but it's something that's very difficult. And I'm actually one of these. When I get into mediations, it's very difficult for me to not want to impulsively respond to opposing counsel. And in mediation or negotiations, shutting up and listening and just letting the other side talk is so incredibly important, because we operate from our own preconceived notions, right? Our experiences, where we're at in our life, etc. And so when we speak, we're speaking from our place, but those hearing are hearing from the place that they're at. And oftentimes that misses each other, which is another huge reason that we have contracts in place, but also communication. So what is the client actually asking for? And what have you said to your client in the past? Oftentimes you'll ask in the group, what do I do with this situation? And my response always to you, photographer, is, what does your contract say? Not because I'm wanting you to beat the client over the head with a contract, but because that is one of those key tools that we talked about in the very beginning of education that you can send your client back into. Contracts are there to be the meeting of the minds and setting of the expectations, building the buyer's confidence and the legal protection, right? But it is the central point to where almost all details, all really pertinent details of the relationship should be boiled into. And this, I just cannot express to you how much having a contract in place, we've already talked about the boundaries and information and all of that, but it gives you a place to point to, especially if you're newer in business or you feel lacking in confidence of telling a client no about something, or you're just not sure it's per the contract. I mean, it's because there's also an element of personal responsibility in the client, in the consumer, right? And like one of the examples that I give, and I just posted about this in the TheLawTog group over the weekend, is, let's say you deliver digital files to a client and they download them, but then they lose them and you no longer have them anymore. A year and a half, we're talking like 14, 16 months later, what do? Right? I mean, you have to tell the client no. And if you didn't contractually agree to back up the photographs, there's an element of personal responsibility of the client to back up those photographs. Like once you have fulfilled your legal obligation, I'm not saying you don't have to. You can back them up if you want to, but this is one reason I'm not a big fan of guaranteeing that you're going to back it up. You can back it up for customer service and have it, but not putting yourself on the legal hook to backing up photographs. Because what if you also lose them? What if Google Drive just goes poof tomorrow, right? Or your hard drive fails or something like that. But we've had this situation at TheLawTog. People have come back from 7 years ago for products that no longer exist. I don't guarantee to have them in the future for you. And so that's why we emphasize and set the expectation of, hey, you got to download and back it up. But we also don't contractually guarantee in the contract that we're going to always have it readily available. Do I try? Sure. Yeah, I try as much as I can, but there's also an element of personal responsibility. So there's this balance between, we talked about boundaries. So there's balance of that we want to lead our clients, but we also don't want them to completely steamroll us so long as we've put the boundaries in place. And so when we come into issue resolution, we look at what are the communications, right? What were the tools that we talked about before? What does the contract say that we can point to? Because that'll help to center everyone as much as possible. And I'm not saying you necessarily have to run to the client and say, hey, look at this contract. We got a couple more steps that I want you to walk through on issue resolution. So you're going to first start with what is the client actually asking for? What is the actual real issue at hand? Try to have communication about that before trying to resolve it. You got to have all the evidence before you can solve the case. And then what do all the communications say? Contract, website, messaging. What did you verbally say to them? Evaluate that. This is the spot that I feel oftentimes other business coaches will wait until after an issue is resolved for you to do. And I think this is something that this needs to be moved up to here. This is number 3 of kind of the process is what can I as the photographer or the business owner, what could I have done to improve the communication? The reason I like having it at this part in the process, it serves two things for me, 2 purposes. It allows for me to do the reflection of all that's going on before I see what the end result's going to be, but it also allows for me to sit and take a step back and go, okay, what was my contribution to this issue? Did I lack in communication somewhere? Did I actually do something that I was not supposed to do, or did I not fulfill an obligation, right? We have to know really where we sit and we want to sit here. We've already done the evaluation with the client. That was the very first step of kind of what are they asking for? What do they really want out of this? And we looked at what our contract, but now we have to look at what our behavior was with it and what could be improved upon. Because also when it gets into the process of solving an issue, if you were at fault, there might be ownership need to be taken on your part, right? Or if there was something you may have done that allowed for a client to do X, Y, and Z you want to fix for the future. So what could I have improved upon? Then I want you guys, and we kind of already done this a little bit, but then I want you to consider not just what's in the contract, but what is the legal foundation that you have here? What are you legally required to do? What must you do, or what can you do? And the difference of that is must is something that you're bound to do under the contract, but that is just the bottom line bar. We can always go above that, and that's the next step. And I talk about this in almost all episodes because this is incredibly important, but I wanted to flesh out kind of the whole evaluation process of the steps you want to do in issue resolution. Notice the legal evaluation wasn't the very first thing. So if you came here today totally wanting to hear how to legally resolve issues, sorry friend, because legal is not void of business. Legal is not void of life, right? It's just one piece of that. So again, we've gone through client, what is the client actually asking for? What did all communications, including contracts, say? What could we have done to improve? What is the legal foundation? And then lastly, what can we do, or are we willing to do that can be client focused and offer customer service? We often see this push-pull in the LawTog group of like, what's the point in having a contract if you're not going to stand by it? Well, that goes back to kind of determining what hills am I really willing to die on. Like, there's boundaries that we put in there, but there's also some things that I sometimes am okay just allowing it to not be an issue, right? If you're on the camp of everything in my contract, I'm sticking by it no matter what, that's your prerogative. You're a business owner, right? That's what you can do. But I do encourage that you have to consider no contract is foolproof. No contract is ironclad. They are not bulletproof. It's not going to protect you from everything. It's not going to be perfect. That's why we did this internal look at what could we have improved upon in our communications. And so there may be room sometimes where you go, okay, I can see how that might have been a miscommunication. And you're able to do something that you're not legally required to do in the contract to offer customer service. So that's why we walk through this process, because then you're able to decide what you do in there. And the reason that I am encouraging this, and I'm really spending the time to do this episode and walk through this, is because I see that push-pull of, well, I have a contract, so no matter what it says, but life does not work that way. So unless you are someone that is every single time you have an issue, you're running to your lawyer and getting it fine-tuned, explaining the situation and having it adjusted for the future, which very rarely happens. So many just purchase from the TheLawTog, download and never look at it again. They're not looking at it as a living, breathing document. and ways for it to grow as your business grows, then you really need to be on top of having some flexibility. I'm not saying give up your legal rights. I'm saying, look and feel comfortable with what your legal requirements and obligations are, and then you can go above and beyond. Now, I'm going to quickly kind of apply this to another big issue that we've been seeing. So if you're a wedding photographer, this is very specifically for you. Oftentimes, when clients are asking questions, we jump to the negative, like this whole boundary. Oh my God, why did she email me on Easter? Well, homie, it might be the only time that she had to email you. We also see this with wedding vendors. And I'm not necessarily talking about the venues who stick the rights grab type language in the contract they have with their clients, but vendors reaching out and saying, oh, hey, can I get some photographs? They may not necessarily. What was the process? What is the client actually asking for? In this case, what is the vendor actually asking for? That may be just their communication style of being able to open the door with you. Again, they're not photographers. They may not know the right terms of, hey, photographer, I'd love to license it from you for usages X, Y, and Z for X amount of time. This is on you. This is on us to lead them. So the exact same process we just walked through for clients, you can also use with like wedding vendors, and highly strongly suggest in those situations, if you're going to extend some time to these vendors, take the time to educate them, get to know them. They're potential referral sources. And I'm not saying just blindly send photographs. You can if you want, but take the time to educate them. Let them know, let them get introduced to the language of our industry, but also legally protect yourself with like having a license in place, right? Saying, yeah, you can use the photographs, but only for social. Have it in writing. I've said it probably 1,500 times in this episode. It can prevent issues because it sets expectations, but that's one of those too. But I just bring this in because we're seeing a lot of issues in the wedding side of the photography industry, where venues are, we're going to use photos because you shot here. And I really do believe that the majority of venues out there, when they reach out to you, which is a win if they reach out to you directly, right? Because they could just be one of the ones that is like backdoor trying to stick it into contracts with their client, with the wedding couple for their venue of trying to take your photos, which is a whole nother conversation. But if someone's coming to you and saying, hey, and asking a question, rise up and find out what it is and educate and discuss with them. And so many of you are probably going to watch this and go, oh yeah, I do that. But do you though? Do you really take the opportunity? Because opportunities come to us and we should be open and willing to engage in them. But again, we've gone through the process of what are our boundaries? What is it that we want to do? But I think when we lead with client focused, we're able to really maximize our opportunities with our clients, with our potential referral sources. And all of it comes around into preventing issues, because issues taint and all this other stuff. And how do issues come about? It is in faulty communication. And guess what? I know there's comms classes. I took how many comms classes in school, but I'm still almost 40 and learning communication. And I'm not perfect at it, but we fine tune it. And that's why we go through the process that we talked about. So just as a quick recap of this, we talk about education at different phases, and also based on the status that the individual or entity that you're working with. Is it pre-client, client? Are they a vendor? Are they an employee? Are they an associate? Or any of that. Then also, what was the next one? Oh, boundaries. Making sure that we have the right boundaries in place in there, and that we are setting them and standing firm in them and educating on that. And then also our issue resolution. I'm telling you what, so many will say, oh, I know about that. Then you come to the firm with an issue, and I'm going to walk you through the exact same 5 major points of the issue resolution that we just walked through, because it's evidence gathering, it's information gathering. I shouldn't say evidence, it's information gathering. It's getting us the requisite information we need to resolve the issue, because our goal is to keep it from escalating. Because once you have a client in the door, you want to maximize. We talked about this last episode. If you have like a personal portrait client, you want to try to maximize as much you can out of that one client, because you spend a lot to get that lead. You spend a lot of time, effort, and money getting them into the door. You want them to have a good relationship, a good transaction and relationship with you, but you also want to look at how you can leverage that in other ways, and we can't do that if we're having issues. So yeah, and not really heavy and legal, but this kind of gives you a little like peek behind the curtain of how I look at things when you do have a legal problem. Contracts has been sprinkled throughout, but it's really if you look at it as a pie, the legal contractual aspects and the boundaries are actually a very small sliver. They are a bit of the foundation and backbone of it, but they're very small. It's really all the behavior around it, what you could do, what you could not do, that will help you going forward.